Well, good morning. Welcome to Debbie's Back Porch. So glad to have you with us. Thanksgiving's just around the corner, and folks are sometimes looking for new things to try. So I've made for you double butter puff biscuits, and you may want to try them. Here are the ingredients. Please pause and write them down. And hey, while you're paused, give us a thumbs up and subscribe if you like our videos, and you'll get a notification when I post new videos about twice a week. So fair warning, if you're a biscuit maker, I'm going to break all the biscuit rules. This is 3 cups of bread flour. And you can use all-purpose, but bread flour really gives you a little bit different texture when you're done, and it works really well in this recipe. Then I'm going to add 1 tablespoonful and 1 teaspoonful of baking powder. And I'm adding all this together. I'm just going to sift it. And then I'm adding 1 teaspoonful of salt. And it's kind of a heaping teaspoonful of kosher salt. And I'll just tell you, just a note, I tend to sift my flour before I start and then sift the ingredients together. I just think you get a better measurement that way. But you can just fluff it with a spoon as you put it into the measuring cup. So I'm going to make sort of a hole in the middle. I tried to make a hole. It didn't stick. And then I'm going to add 1 stick or half a cup of room temperature butter. And yes, I know cold butter is what you've always been told, and continue to do that in other recipes. This one calls for room temperature butter. So I have here 1 cup of buttermilk, and you have to use buttermilk, and I'm going to beat an egg into it. Now I may need more buttermilk, probably will need more buttermilk, but I'm going to start out with this 1 cup and beat the egg up in it really well. And this is going to enrich the dough. You can tell the difference. Then I'll pour the buttermilk over the butter and cream them together. And as I do that, I will bring small bits of flour in to the mixture. This is how you make biscuits, or this is how I make biscuits. It always works really well, but this is a different kind of biscuit. And the rule with biscuits usually is you don't mix it much, but you do mix this much, and it's going to take a little bit to bring it all together. And I'm going to just mix it here with my hands until the batter picks up all the flour in the bowl. And I'm looking at it now, and I'm thinking I need about 2 more tablespoons full of buttermilk. And you know, as I'm making this, I know someone is saying, oh, that's like scones. Well, it sort of is like scones, but it's not scones. It's like a cross between scones and biscuits and puff pastry. So here I'm adding another couple tablespoons full of buttermilk. Don't add too much. That's why I just am adding it a little at a time. I measured out a cup, knowing I might have to add just a little bit more. You don't want the batter to be as thin as regular biscuit dough. If you've seen my biscuit video, you'll know what I mean. That's like mashed potatoes. This needs to be a little stiffer than that, but still loose enough for you to work it. So it's pulling clean at the bottom of the bowl. See? And it's still a kind of a shaggy dough. And that's what we're looking for. We want a really good dough that we can handle without it being too stiff. So I'm going to turn this out. See, it's pulling clean there. I'm going to turn this out and start forming it. I'll break some more rules. So I got this nice glass cutting board for bread. I'll never cut on it. I got it just for bread because my counters are not great. So I'm going to turn this out. And the rule we're going to break is with biscuits and any quick bread, you're really not supposed to work it much. We are going to work this a little. I'm not going to knead it, but I'm going to put some time into making it smooth and shaping it. And then we're going to laminate this dough. You may not be familiar with the term laminating bread, but basically it means layering it with butter. And that's how you get all the nice layers in puff pastry, croissants. You make a layer with butter. And then you fold it and you make layers. But you usually, with yeast breads, puff pastries and such, you use really, really cold butter and then you beat it out. I'm doing it a little different. I'm using room temperature butter, and then I'm going to refrigerate the whole thing. And your flakiness in puff pastries and such comes from the moisture in the butter creating steam and little tiny air pockets as it melts. So quick bread dough is really not firm enough to really do much spreading of cold butter. So I'm starting with room temperature butter, not melted, but soft enough that I can handle it and spread it on this very tender dough. So you can see that I'm shaping it into a rectangle. It's pretty thick. It's probably an inch thick. Let me pull it down a little bit because I want to fold it and I don't want it to be too puffy when I start that process. So I'm going to take it down to about a half an inch. And I think we can handle that. And I am being fairly gentle with it. I mean, with yeast bread, you can play with it and be rough with it and throw it around, and it just makes it better. But with quick bread dough, you do want to have some gentle handling here. So I'm going to break off the butter. I'll do it in 4 pieces, and I'm going to mash it with my fingers so I can spread it out. And don't forget now, this dough is pretty tender. If you're not careful, you'll tear it. But I'm going to spread it out as thin as I can without tearing my dough. A brush doesn't work. It's too cold for a brush. So I'm just using this little spatula. You could probably do it with a pastry knife. And I'll get another bit. When I get it all on, I'm going to spread it out toward the outside edges. But you don't have to come, well, you really shouldn't come all the way to the outside edges. So I'll just continue doing this and I'll be back. So I have all the butter on. That's 1 whole stick. And I'm spreading it out just as thinly as I can without tearing my dough here. And I think we've just about got it. As long as there are no big lumps, we're good to go. Okay, now we're going to fold. And I've got my pastry cutter, pastry scraper here. Just going to make sure it's not stuck. As I've said, this is very tender dough and it's not really dry, so it might stick. So do this kind of carefully. Going to do the letter fold 1/3 of the way up and then 1/3 of the way down. And kind of work on your seam there a little bit. And I'll just sort of shape it up again. Now, it's going in the fridge now. And it's going in for at least 30 minutes. An hour is better. And it can be overnight if you need it to be. So if you want to go this far the day before, that's fine. There's still several steps, but you can do this much the day before. Going to wrap this in plastic wrap, and what we're doing now is we're chilling that butter so that we have the same effect as if we had used cold butter to start with, so that we get that steam effect when we cook it. And I'm going to set this on a plate because it's so soft. I don't want it to get misshapen in the refrigerator. So minimum 30 minutes. I recommend an hour. Overnight's okay. And we're ready to finish up. It's nice and chilled. That helps handling it too. And I'm just going to flip it out onto my board here. And just a term here. When we buttered it and folded it, that's called a turn. And you can do as many turns as you want here. Each turn gives you 3 more layers in your final product. And I actually kind of lost count. I think I did 3 more turns and then I shaped it. See, it's still very loose batter there. very loose dough, so let me flour up a little bit. And it's basically the same thing over and over, except you don't have to add more butter. The butter layer's in there. Every time you give it a turn, every time you fold it in threes, you add 2 more layers of butter and 3 more layers of bread. So we just keep folding it, and that butter gets thinner and thinner, and the layers of the bread get thinner and thinner. You want to kind of make sure that you square up the sides a little bit each time, or it just gets kind of messy to handle. So you see how thick that is. I'm going to do another turn. That's fold it a third of the way up and a third of the way over, and then I sort of roll it to make sure that that seam is on the edge. And I don't have to refrigerate it again, but if the dough gets too sticky, wrap it up and refrigerate it again. Just like if you were making puff pastry or a croissant. My kitchen's fairly cool today, so I didn't have to refrigerate it a second time. So we've done 2 turns now. We're going to do it again, which means we're going to add even more layers of flaky biscuit dough with layers of butter in between. I'm going to flip it over. You can already see the layers forming in this, by the way. Flip it over to make sure that it doesn't stick. And I'm going to shut up now and just let you watch a little while, just so you can sort of see the technique. And I'm actually going to do 1 turn from the sides. Not that it makes any difference. It just happened to work out that way this time. You know, 3 turns is really enough. I just happened to give this one more. Pinch that seam. So I think I ended up giving this 4 turns in all. And now I'm going to shape it more into a square. I'm going to cook these in a square pan. And I'm going to just cut them with a knife, not with a cookie cutter. So I want my final shape here to be about the same as my pan. You can cut these with cookie cutters in many different sizes. I'm going to cut 9, but you could make 16 very easily if you want a little bit smaller. Okay, so this is another turn just to get me to the square shape. And I promise I'm done. I'm just going to roll this out to shape it. So we've got our nice square there. You see all of those layers. Just shape it up a little bit. Roll it out just a little because it's too thick. And I want to roll it out to the size of my pan. And then I'll be right back. So it's all rolled out. It's about the size of my pan. I have just enough room to put a little space between them on the pan. I'm going to cut it into 9 pieces. You can very easily cut this into 16 pieces, just 4 by 4. You can certainly use a cookie cutter. I'm going to oil my pan with the butter wrappers. But if you use a cookie cutter, you're going to have a lot of waste unless you have a square cookie cutter. And if you take what's left over, see, I'm going to mark this out. I'm going to eyeball it. Then if you take what's left over and you mix it together and cut it again, then you've lost your layers. So you can surely do that, but the last few you make will be different. But if you have a square cookie cutter, then you don't have that waste. So I'm just going to cut these And no, they're not all going to be the same size because I'm really not good at eyeballing. But they'll be close. And they're ready for the pan. And you can see that this would have easily made 16 nice sized biscuits. I actually want these to be big enough for sausage. So I cut them in 9. I'm going to make sausage biscuits out of them. And I'm going to place them over here on the pan. And I'm not going to place them touching. Normally I put biscuits where they touch, so that makes them rise up. These are going to rise up amazingly high, just as they are. And the last step is I'm going to brush the tops with this little bit of buttermilk I have left. And that's going to help brown them on top and add a little crispness. So my oven is preheating to 425 degrees. And I'm going to set my timer for 20 minutes. And then I will probably have to take them out and stick them up under my broiler to finish browning them off. You may not have to. That's just my stove. I'll be back. And I did do 2 minutes under the broiler. Aren't they pretty? You want to transfer these over to a rack because as they cool, they'll get soggy on the bottom. And right now they have a nice crisp bottom. See all those lovely flakes. And that's from the laminated dough. Sometime over the next couple of months, I'll make croissants for you. And that takes a much more precise laminating procedure. And they're wonderful. Really worth the trouble. And so are these. It takes a little extra time to turn a biscuit into a puff biscuit. But I want you to look. Look at all those beautiful layers. And there's butter between them. See the steam coming off? I have to try this. I'm going to put a little butter and jam on this one. The rest of them are for sausage egg biscuits. I got grandkids coming later. Thank you for joining us on Debbie's Back Porch. Hope to see you again tomorrow. That is so good.